Part 1. Falling into Darkness. In September of 1973, when I was nearly 3, I fell into a reservoir of water located on the patio of the house where I grew up in Bogota, Colombia. This cement tank, about 5 feet deep, was above ground and held 900 gallons of frigid water. Bogota is a high-altitude city that can be quite chilly in the morning, and the water in the reservoir might have been below 40 degrees Fahrenheit. The purpose of this deep tank was to collect water for hand-washing clothes, so next to the tank there was a small flat surface for scrubbing. Early one morning after my parents had left for work, I and my 2 sisters Lise and Lily, none of us over 3, were left at the house in the hands of the maid. She was a young lady who didn't pay much attention to us when my parents were not around. That morning my oldest sister and I decided to play catch across the tank. The walls of the tank were high for us, so we grabbed some stools and managed to pull ourselves up. My sister sat comfortably on the flat surface next to the tank, and I kneeled precariously on the thin edge at the other side, so I had to make an extra effort to keep my balance. What happened next still is so vivid in my mind that I can remember every detail, like it happened yesterday. My sister and I were playing with 2 medium-sized balls, one dark yellow and the other green. The balls had the letters of the alphabet engraved on them, next to pictures of an animal or an object. We were throwing the balls to each other when the yellow ball slipped from my hands. I tried to grab it but it rolled on the surface of the water. Then I lost my balance and fell into this dark and seemingly bottomless hole. My eyes locked onto the picture of a smiling white bunny painted on the ball as I was falling, and I can still feel the texture of the letters slipping through my fingers. The first feeling of the plunge was a shocking coldness. My body convulsed violently, and it felt like my chest was imploding. My desperation was intense, as I couldn't breathe. When I touched bottom I instinctively thrust upward with my feet, but I rapidly sank again and then my body became unresponsive. I could hear my sister screaming distantly from the surface, trying to reach me, but there wasn't anything she could do, she was too little to reach me. I could feel my heart pounding in my head like a bass drum. With eyes open, I stared hopelessly into the darkness. Then suddenly came a feeling of total relief. I didn't know why then, but I was at peace and there was no anguish. My heart stopped pounding, everything turned absolutely still, I was no longer cold and didn't feel like fighting anymore. My body simply became insubstantial. Then I noticed that a dim light, like a candle, had somehow begun glowing, just enough to illuminate my watery surrounding. I could see little bubbles, and then behind them I noticed a body suspended in the water. I remember looking curiously at its expressionless face and seeing the eyes staring, wide open. This was my own lifeless body, but I was neither surprised nor frightened to recognize it. Instead I felt an immense joy and freedom, and soon the image of my body was replaced by the most beautiful flowers blooming from nowhere. And before I knew it, I was somehow being lifted and carried away by the flowers. In hindsight, it's no wonder that I was relieved to be freed from the burden of my body, as I was a very fragile and sick baby and always felt unwell. As the mysterious flowers lifted me away, everything felt peaceful and bright. At last I was free from the aches and pain I had carried since birth. So I simply kept going away without ever looking back at that body. I then abruptly found myself in the maid's bedroom, looking down on her lounging on the bed. She was listening to the radio, unaware of what happened to me. Next, I was looking at my mom walking down the street several blocks away from the house, coming up on her bus stop. Time and distance had vanished for me, I could be anywhere at any time. It wasn't until that moment that I realized that I didn't possess a defined form. I could communicate with everything and I was part of everything. It was like the wholeness and I were one. As I sank into an atmosphere of pure bright light I had the clear awareness that before I became human, I was a being made of pure light, just as I was now. While I was experiencing this blissful state of being, my mom suddenly sensed an intense feeling of dread. She turned around and ran back home, as fast as she could. When she came into the house she knew exactly where to go. On the patio she found my oldest sister leaning into the tank, helplessly wailing to her, "Ingrid is in there and I can't reach her." When my mom pulled my lifeless body out of the water, several minutes had passed. My lips were blue, my body cold, my skin pale, and I had no pulse. She was trained in CPR, so she pushed her fingers into my little chest and blew air into my lungs until I began choking and gurgling. I don't remember feeling anything when she was trying to revive me. By that time I was far away. Suddenly I was falling, as if I had jumped from the top of the tallest high-rise in the world, feeling as if I was being sucked back into my body like it was a vacuum. Then came the return of the intense, agonizing cold. I knew that I was back. When all of this happened to me, I was just a baby. I didn't have any preconceived notions about a near-death experience, NDE. At the time I was too little even to understand that I had essentially died. All I knew was that I'd left my body and went to a place of indescribable well-being. However, this experience didn't feel unfamiliar to me. Somehow I comprehended that the current life that I was living was just a continuation of a very long existence. As I grew up and remembered my drowning, I could never get away from the question, how could I have seen my body lifeless if I was still alive? This experience made it clear to me that there was an existence beyond the body. Like the shell of a crab is an extension of the crab itself, our body is also but a shell, and when it is not needed it will fall away. Before I was 3, I was gifted with knowing that I had existed for a very long time. In fact, I have come and gone in different realms many more times, wearing many different shells.